Welcome to Happily Ever After is just the beginning. Keeping your relationship not just together, but happy, and we mean truly happy, is part art and part science. You've come to the right place. Here's your host, Leslie Dories.
You've probably heard the adage that familiarity breeds contempt. And nothing allows for more familiarity than marriage. And in fact, in my opinion, that's one of its selling points, to be fully seen and be accepted and loved completely. So how do you keep contempt or even just complacency from ruining your marriage? Well, that's the question today's show is designed to tackle. And to help get to the answers, I am joined by Oscar and Kiya Frazier, co-founders of nDemand Consulting and authors of Confessions, The Truth About Perfect Timing, a couple's guide to reaching everything you desire in life. So, Kiya and Oscar, thanks for being on the show and tackling this interesting topic. And I love the title of your book because it implies that we can get everything we desire.
Absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
The interesting thing about you guys is not only are you married, but you're also co-founders of your own business, where you've actually acquired the title, which I thought was really interesting, of Mr. and Mrs. Smith of Global Crisis Management, which I'm assuming refers to the film Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Hopefully you guys are taking that to each other.
Yes, minus the shooting.
Minus the shooting. So these are two things, being in business together and being married individually are challenging, and you've taken them on simultaneously, which I'm just like in awe. So can you give us a little bit of the backstory?
Absolutely.
Kiya, you want to start with this one?
Yeah. So we were engaged in 2011, and then we were married in 2012. And shortly after getting back from our honeymoon, we lost everything. And let me explain that. Let me put some context behind it. So we got back from the honeymoon, and probably about 2 days after, I received a call. I was working a nice corporate job, doing marketing in the federal space. Oscar was a program manager, and he was doing work in the federal space as well. So we had these dual incomes, and we had this perfect plan of how we were going to roll out of corporate space into entrepreneurship, and everything was set up. We had planned it all out. So 2 days after,
well, we know what they say about plans, right?
Oh yeah. Wait, this is going to get good. So 2 days after our honeymoon, I get a phone call, and on the phone call is my boss and HR, and I received the notice that I have been rolled off. They were doing budget cuts, and marketing, of course, usually is the first to go.
Right.
So I came back into the living room, and I looked at Oscar, and I said, I just lost my job. And he's like, wow.
Yeah, 2 days after coming back from a honeymoon and on cloud nine, all this stuff happened. Yeah.
So we had to get really honest and transparent with each other at that point. And we had to really talk about it because I could easily go out and find another corporate job, but this seemed like the perfect time for us to start kind of building our business and really solidifying everything that we wanted to do. So we got transparent with each other, had that long talk, and we decided that he would continue in corporate space, and I would go ahead and start putting all the foundation together for the business.
Yeah.
So,
and Leslie, Kiya is telling like the PG-13 version of this. The other aspect of this was the panic that first ensued.
Right.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
So after the first maybe month or so, when we started to settle in a little bit, we said, well, look, maybe, I'm doing good financially. We can probably keep this up and going. And at the time, I was responsible for a large program with an agency where I was managing about 147 FTEs. And so my executive came into the room and said, look, Oscar, we have to make some cuts. And we're going to need for you to, roll off some people. So I asked him, okay, no problem. How many people are we talking about? And he says, everyone. And so in my mind, I'm not thinking everyone includes me. So I'm like, well, perhaps I can, have an individual conversation with each of my staff members to let them know what's going on, which I did. And it was very, very, stressful. But shortly thereafter, maybe about 2 days after me rolling everyone off, I got the call from HR and from my executive, and I was rolled off, and I was let go. And I remember vividly the phone call and calling Kiya, with my voice probably still shaking a little bit, just saying, are you ready to do this entrepreneurial thing full time? And she's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, come pick me up. I just got fired. And it was the scariest, most rewarding time of our life. And that's what started, our journey towards nDemand consulting services. And when it comes to global crisis management, that was something that kind of morphed over time, right? Because of our federal experience, we found ourselves doing projects across the continent of Africa and working and countering violent extremism, those sorts of things. And so we eventually got called by one of our PR folks, like, you guys are like the Mr. and Mrs. Smith of global crisis management. And we just kind of coined and carried the name since then.
Stuck. Yeah.
Right. So I mean, this is, people talk about, and, the traditional marriage vows of, for better or worse, for richer, for poorer, and you guys are on like cloud nine, and suddenly you get your legs literally, figuratively cut out from underneath you. And so suddenly you go from the better into the, oh my gosh, this incredible challenge of, which when people hear these things, it's like, it rocks the relationship. And so you guys had a really early challenge right there.
First 90 days of marriage, we were unemployed, both of us, within first 90 days. Absolutely. So, you talked about having first having this conversation when Kiya was let go, and you talk about, that she gave the PG version because, of course, it's terrifying because, like you said, you guys have this all planned out, and then suddenly you take a immediate right turn. It's like, well, wait, this wasn't where we were headed. So how did you guys how did you guys handle that? Because that's losing a job is traumatic individually, let alone the repercussions onto a relationship. Yeah, I'll tell you the mistake that I made when we first both got out on this journey. Because of my background in program management and data analytics, I was a very militant style, quote unquote, boss, right? Leader. And I tried to apply that same concept to Kiya as a team. And it completely backfired, totally backfired, to where it was when it came to us being married, right? So intimacy and us being nice to each other beyond work became very difficult because Kiya's probably like, well, how can I be nice to the same guy that just now said that I was behind on 5 different project schedules and blah, blah, blah. And so this becomes a major issue. So I think for us, that was the most painful. I know that was a mistake that I made in the beginning. And then as we started to, and I'm sure you probably have heard the phrase of forming, storming, norming, performing. And we were really in that storming phase for a very long time, just because I didn't understand how to be a friend / husband and a partner in business as opposed to a quote unquote boss. I think that was one of my mistakes that I made. Kiya, would you? Or how did we kind of get through what's like when we started getting our lanes? Or
so we had to really sit down and have a serious conversation about what lanes we ran in and where our strengths were. And we started learning that our strengths kind of complemented each other. While Oscar was more so on the operation side of the house, I was more so on the marketing and strategy and branding of the house. And so when we learned what lane we kind of ran in and how to kind of keep those separate and who was responsible for what task, that's when things started to become very I'm not going to say easy because it's never quite easy, but it started to run smoother at that point.
Yeah.
And we started learning that, okay, sometimes the lanes will cross, but whoever is the lane owner is the one that makes that final decision.
Absolutely.
Well, and I love that example because, I mean, you guys were thrust into this, not, but in reality, that's what every marriage has to figure out, that we're partners. Nobody is in charge. There isn't a boss. We're co-bosses of this. We're co-creators of this. And, I talk about spheres of influence or spheres of responsibility, right? That one partner has, takes the lead, not charge, but takes the lead in this area, like you said, Kiya, about, they're the ones who make the final decisions, but both people are involved in it. But, this is where I'm, this is where I'm focusing my time and attention, and I'm trusting that you're focusing your time and attention over here in this sphere that you've taken on. And really being able to allow that kind of flow, which I think is what makes, when marriages work, I think that's what it is, because what we found in research is that the more partnership kind of relationship exists, the stronger and healthier and more successful the marriage is going to be. But you have to negotiate that, right?
Yes,
I mean, you have to negotiate that.
It's certainly a give and take. And we just by trial by fire for us, we learned like this 4-step, kind of process, if you will, that we, help other couplepreneurs out with, which I'm sure we'll probably talk about later. But that's, I mean, we didn't learn this by Googling it. I mean, this was really trial and error, mistake after mistake, me getting my behind cussed out a lot, from just making newlywed mistakes, right? As well as trying to be entrepreneurs on top of that, So yeah, I totally agree with you.
Well, and I so love that because I think that's what a lot of couples run into, is that they're thinking, we're in love, we got married, everything's great, it's all going to be smooth sailing, and then they hit that first speed bump. And I mean, you guys hit like a speed mountain, but but you hit this speed bump, and then it's like, well, what do we do? And Oscar, I loved your saying this, because this is what people do, is we go immediately to what we know, right? Mm-hmm. So you went to your training, you went to your experience, you went to this, and then tried to apply it to the marriage and went, oh, that's not going to work.
Mistake. Total mistake. Absolutely.
But that's what we do. But you guys were able to write it out. So, we're talking about what happened as, you first got together, and we're talking about the challenges. So what other challenges have you encountered being partners in life as well as in business?
I would say finding balance. There's no such thing as work-life balance. I hear that a lot, but when you're in entrepreneurship, there's no such thing. So we had to figure out what was going to be our balance, how we were going to manage our days, and what was that cutoff point to when we come home and home is home and it's not work, So, and to this day, we still will sit down and we'll say we're going to watch a TV show or something, and then all of a sudden we spark up a conversation about business, and that's okay in that environment. But we've learned not to bring business into the bedroom, and we've also learned how to set goals for the day. So we'll make a list. And these are the things we want to get accomplished for the day. We set a time limit on when we want to get them accomplished by, and then at that point, once that time is hit, then whatever hasn't been completed gets moved to the next day, and we consider that the end of our day, and we call that office time, and now we're going home and we're going to have home time. So we had to set those rules. We had to put those rules in place.
Okay. And I want to talk more about that in just a moment, but I need to remind my listeners that This Is Happily Ever After is just the beginning on webtalkradio.net. I'm Leslie Dories, and I'm talking with power couple Oscar and Kiya Frazier about how to find balance in life between work and home. Now, this is a challenge that many couples have, even if they aren't in business together. And maybe you and your spouse struggle with it too. I liken it to a juggler that just keeps adding balls or flaming swords, trying to keep everything in the air without stopping to think if some of those items could maybe be put down. And what this requires is a pause and then an intentional examination of your marriage. And if that is something that you would find helpful, then I invite you to schedule a free Create Your Happily Ever After discovery call with me. You can reach me by phone at area code 919-924-0463. Again, that's 919-924-0463. Or you can reach me by email at Leslie, Lesli, at foundationscoachingnc.com. That's FOUNDATIONS, coaching, N as in Nancy, C as in Charlie.com. And now I want to get back to this great conversation I'm having about how we kind of put all the pieces of our lives together. And, Kiya, I love that because, I always hate when I hear people talk about work-life balance as if work is not part of life. I mean, so I specify work-home balance. And when you guys are in business together, like you said, it's easy for it to bleed over. And yes. So you said that you guys, have work time and home time,
yes.
Right?
Yes. We try to separate it as much as possible.
And so how else do you manage to balance business and marriage? So
Oscar's got some really good tips as well.
Okay.
His brain is just turning and he's dying to share.
If the listeners could see my face, I'm probably over here smiling and just like showing clearly that I had something to say on that one.
Right.
So it's a two-letter word that I had to realize due to my analysis paralysis problem, and that word is it's okay. Okay. And the reason why I'm saying that is because I literally overanalyzed everything in the first few years of us trying to balance between business and marriage. And are we doing this right or are we doing this wrong? And all this stuff. And I finally realized that it's okay. There's no playbook to this thing. I mean, when you're setting out in your business and in your relationship, and if you're doing it simultaneous, you're going to screw one side up eventually. Something's going to happen. And you have to recognize that it's okay. And I think over time, as Mike Tyson would say, everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face, right? So as you hit these different roadblocks and these challenges, just enjoy the ride. It's okay. And I think that's what I had to learn. And once I started calming down, I think then the relationship started to make sense. And it was okay to, put down work. And then it's okay to pick up work sometimes. And you realize that it's an ebb and flow.
Yeah. Well, and I love it, and that happens to be one of my husband's all-time favorite quotes as well, Mike Tyson's quote.
Yeah.
But I mean, and it is, and it sounds, and it sounds easy in theory, but the anxiety does get stirred up. I mean, especially when you guys are entrepreneurs, and that has its own dynamic. Right. And we all have varying degrees of comfort with certain things, right? With comfort with risk or comfort with, how much money we have or whatever it might be. And you guys kind of have a double dose of that because you got business and marriage. But I think everybody struggles. So how did you guys manage those differences?
So I like to think that I am more of a calculated risk taker. And Oscar has morphed into the risk taker. Let's go for it over time. At one point we were both kind of balanced on the same, but I think over time he's become more of the let's go. Let's jump, and we'll throw the parachute later. And I think that having that balance between the two of us helps us. Some of the ideas that he has and he comes up with are absolutely great. And then I'm the one now that starts to kind of take it piece by piece and think about, okay, did you think about this? Did you think about that? Did you think about this? And then once we've covered some of those things, then I'm like, okay, I'm in, let's go. So we've learned how to kind of balance that. And I think that in any relationship, any marriage, partnership, there's always one person that's willing to take more risk than the other. But you have to be transparent with each other, and you have to really talk it through, and you have to be open to that conversation and understand why you're like that, right? Why Oscar is more prone to take a little bit more risk than I am, and why I'm more calculated in the risk that I'm willing to take. Yeah. And then once you talk through that and be honest with each other, honesty, transparency, that is the key. That is the key to, that's kind of the secret sauce to making things work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, absolutely. So is that something, because, one of my, you know how in real estate it's location. To me, in relationships, whether it's a business relationship or a personal relationship, it's communication, right?
Oh, yeah.
And it is that openness and honesty and transparency. So is that something that you both kind of did naturally, or was there a learning curve involved? Because I think that's where a lot of people struggle.
Huge learning curve. I know that on my end, speaking from the husband perspective, I had to learn the word humility. And being okay with not knowing something, right? Because most of the time as the husband, you have this notion of the provider, the fixer, the security, etc. And there's certain areas that you may just not be secure in, and it takes a level of humility to be able to expose that vulnerability to your spouse, right? And I think so to answer that, I know it was a bit more long-winded, but that was what I went through. I had to learn humility. It just took me a while to understand that it's okay to not know something, and for me to be able to express that to Kiya. And I think over time, it's much easier now, right? But we've also been married almost 10 years. We've been together for since 2007, right? So it's a nice flow now. But yeah, that was my biggest challenge.
So Kiya, I hear this a lot from husbands about that they have this idea that they have to be the provider, that they have to fix things, that they have to know everything. And so when Oscar started to recognize that maybe it was okay not to know everything, how did you play into that? Because I think it's really critical if we want men to open up and be vulnerable, and as Oscar said, find humility. I think that that the women, that their partners have a role to play in that.
Absolutely. I quickly learned that you have to give them a soft landing, a place, a safe place to kind of open up in those type of situations. And then look at ways that you can help, do some research and provide some resources that might help them solve the problem that they might have or the question that they can't answer. But you have to kind of be that support role when they're having that vulnerable moment. And on my part, I had to learn how to speak up, right? So women tend to kind of go into themselves and they don't really speak up about how they're feeling about things or what they're seeing. We tend to kind of internalize a lot of things. So I had to learn how to speak up and say, hey, I'm seeing this. What do you think? And kind of help with that balance as well. So things that he couldn't see or things that I might think are going to happen down the road, being okay with speaking up about that so that, we both were on the same playing field.
Right. And, and one of the things that I talk to people about is, we're two different people. We have different experiences. We can see different things. And to me, that's that's a benefit of marriage, not a bug. And so being able to productively bring that to the table, like you were talking earlier about, the difference in risk taking and how, you kind of bring in this, okay, so have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? Where it's, it opens up. It doesn't close things down. It actually opens up. Oh yeah. Okay. Let's take a look at that. And that is, it's kind of scary to do, but it sounds like you guys have really worked through the process. Is that an accurate assessment?
Yeah, it was a lot of trial and error. Yeah, it was a lot of trial and error, and by no means are we perfect. We still have our moments where we have to pull up and stop and have conversations to really get back on the same page. We still have them to this day, but it's really trial and error and being honest with each other and really talking through things.
Oscar, I got the impression that you wanted to say something.
Are you sure you can't see me right now?
I am sure I can't see you.
The summary there for that particular area is that we now have like kind of a 4-step sort of process, if you will, that we do, and that we also when we're talking and coaching other couplepreneurs or just entrepreneurs, we work with them on a 4-step process. And this was something, again, trial by fire from our end, but we've, simplified that down into some simple steps as far as how we get to that communicative sort of space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what are those steps?
So, Kai, you want to hit one? So I love number 2, so you got to go number 1 there.
First one is my favorite word throughout this entire conversation is just being transparent. What do each of you really want to do? And having that conversation and asking that question. That's the first thing. And really talking about your dreams, what are your passions, and what are your goals, and being completely honest about it. Even if it's like, I want to be a cupcake maker, or I want to go jump out of an airplane, whatever it might be, getting all the way down to the grain of it and talking about what you desire to do.
Yeah. And then in step 2, Leslie, what we do is it's called an introspective analysis. And if you can bear with me, allow me to be a quick data geek for just 1 second. If you can think about just a sheet of paper with a line going across, the center of that sheet, and then a line, and then 1 tick mark in the middle of that line, and look at that as that's your current state as that couplepreneur, that aspiring entrepreneur. What we do is we make them go 3 ticks to the left, meaning in your retrospect. So we look at 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and 15 years ago. And we have them, and we work closely with the couplepreneurs on what were the things that you wanted to do and what were the excuses that held you back from doing them. And normally that process can take anywhere from a couple days to a couple months, because it depends on how granular, because what it does is it begins to uncover a lot more of the vulnerabilities, right? Like I was scared to take that step. This is what happened. And so we go, once we've done the 5, 10, 15 year back, then we look at forward progression, right? Then we go to the right of that same midpoint, and we go 5 years forward, 10 years forward, 15 years forward. And that's when we start to look at, in 5 years, I want to do this, or I want to be this. Now, I know that 5 years ago I had the following excuses or issues, but I've already overcome those things now, or here's how I'm going to overcome those things to get to that 5-year goal. And we do the same thing for the 10-year and the 15-year. And so that's usually the longest portion of our coaching, because once you're done with this, you now have seen all of the majority of your vulnerabilities from up to 15 years ago, and then you're also looking at what you're aspiring to do 15 years ahead.
I love it. So what's step 3?
Yeah. And step 3 is on taking action, right? So now that we've gotten all this, we've done all the fun, painful sometimes things on the introspective analysis. Now it's about taking action and putting it actually to work. And finally, and I think most important, is celebrating the wins. We're not talking about the milestones, the major goals, etc., but when you've accomplished something or you've gotten rid of a fear or you've accomplished something that perhaps was a setback before, we actually encourage the couplepreneurs to stop and really celebrate that, whether it's going out to dinner, whether it's because what that's also going to do is build the relationship aspect of your marriage, right, or your relationship. So that way, over time, you begin to understand that it's a friendship as well, right? We are friends first, we're married first, and then we have a business.
Right. And I love that because I think people seriously underestimate how important being friends, respecting, liking each other as people is to creating a healthy marriage. Because, yes, we want to be physically attracted to our partners. That's always a good thing. But physical, but that whole in love hormones stuff that kind of takes us over so that we meet, mate, and procreate. Really can get in the way because if we don't really like each other,
Right. Absolutely,
right? And I love that 4-step plan because I think it's one that can be applied to marriage. It's like I tell my clients, it's like, okay, so most businesses do some kind of plan, 1-year plan. They'll take a look. What did we do well this year? What didn't we do well? Or people get, if they work for a corporation, they get their performance they get their performance review. And it's like, I think we ought to be doing that in our marriages as well. It's like, how am I doing as a partner? How are we doing as a couple? Where do we want to be? Did we get, I think it's a great way to look at this. So unfortunately, as much as I would love to continue this conversation because you guys are just wonderful to talk to,
thank you.
My producer is going to be yelling at me. So can you share with the listeners where they can learn more about what you guys do, where they can get your book, whatever it is you would like them to know?
Absolutely. The listeners can go out to KOThoughtleaders.com. So that's just K for Kilo, O, Oscar, thoughtleaders.com. And then they also can shoot us a text by texting the word business to 678-672-1444. Again, text the word business to 678-672-1444.
Oh, well, thank you guys so much and for just being this wonderful example. And what I want people to know is that not every couple is also in business together, but you do share the same desires to be connected and feel supported. So making room for each of you as individuals while still being part of a couple is truly a dance. And what steps do you do well, and where could you improve your rhythm? Well, hopefully today's show has given you some insight, and I look forward to you guys coming back. And until next week, stay loving.